You know how people always say that family is supposed to be your safe place? That your parents are supposed to protect you, love you, and guide you into your future? Well, I used to believe that too. My name is Maria, and I grew up thinking my mom was my biggest supporter. I thought she was the kind of woman who would sacrifice everything for her children. But life has a cruel way of teaching you that love doesn't always mean fairness. If you're listening to this, buckle up, because my story isn't a simple one. It's a story about betrayal, heartbreak, and ultimately revenge. And trust me, you won't see the twists coming. I grew up in what most people would call an ordinary American family. We lived in a mid-sized town where everyone knew everyone else's business. Our house was a modest 3-bedroom place on a quiet street. Nothing fancy, but it was home. There was me, my mom, who I'll call Susan here, and my younger brother, Daniel. My dad wasn't really in the picture. He left when I was just 6 years old. He and my mom fought constantly, and one night, he packed his bags and never came back. For years, my mom would tell us, "Your father was weak. I'm the one who stayed. I'm the one who sacrifices for this family." And I believed her. As the oldest, I took on responsibility early. I cooked sometimes, helped Daniel with his homework, and dreamed of the day I could go to college, get out of our little town, and build something better. My mom always said, "Maria, I'm saving every penny for your education. You're going to be the first in this family to graduate college. You're going to make us proud." Those words became my anchor. I studied hard, stayed out of trouble, and built my entire future around the idea that my mom had my back. But here's the thing. While she promised me the world, it was always Daniel who seemed to get her unconditional love. He was the golden child, the baby boy. He could skip homework, lie about where he was going, even bring home failing grades, and she'd brush it off with a laugh. "Boys will be boys," she'd say. Meanwhile, if I got a B+ instead of an A, she'd frown and say, "Maria, you have to do better if you want to succeed." It stung, but I told myself it didn't matter. I was stronger. I was the responsible one. One day, my hard work would pay off. By the time I reached my senior year of high school, I was exhausted but excited. I had applied to several universities, and I actually got into my dream school. When that acceptance letter arrived, I felt like my life was finally about to begin. I remember running into the kitchen, letter in hand, shouting, "Mom, I got in. I really got in." She looked at me, smiled faintly, and said, "That's nice, Maria, but we'll have to see about the money." Her reaction surprised me. I expected tears of joy, a hug, something. But she was so calm, almost cold. Still, I brushed it off. Maybe she was just stressed. For months, I asked about the savings. "Mom, you've been saving for this, right? You said you had money put aside for my college." Every time, she'd nod and say, "Yes, of course. Don't worry, Maria. I promised you, didn't I?" And I believed her. Everything came crashing down 2 weeks before graduation. That night is etched into my memory like a scar. We were sitting at the dinner table, me, Mom, and Daniel. Out of nowhere, Mom said, almost casually, "Maria, I need to talk to you about college. We don't actually have enough money for you to go this year." I froze. "What do you mean, we don't have enough? You've been saving my whole life." She sighed and looked at Daniel, then back at me. "I had to use most of that money for your brother. He needs it more right now." The room went silent. My fork slipped from my hand and clattered against the plate. "For Daniel?" I whispered. "He doesn't even want to go to college. He's never even applied." Daniel shrugged like it was no big deal. "Mom's just helping me out. Chill, Maria. Chill." My entire future was being ripped away, and he wanted me to chill? I turned to my mom, desperate. "How could you do this to me? You promised. My whole life you promised." Her face hardened. "Maria, don't be dramatic. You're smart. You'll figure something out. But Daniel needs support right now, and I'm his mother. Don't you think I know what's best for my own children?" And just like that, my dream crumbled. That night, I cried until I couldn't breathe. All the sacrifices I'd made, all the nights I stayed up studying, every moment I trusted her, it all felt meaningless. She chose him. She always chose him. But here's the thing. Betrayal has a way of planting seeds inside you. Seeds of anger, of suspicion, of something darker. Because deep down, something didn't add up. If she had been saving my entire life, how could there be nothing left? Where did it all go? That question would lead me down a path I never expected. A path full of lies, secrets, and a discovery that would shatter me to the core. And from that moment on, I made myself a promise. If she thought she could destroy my future without consequences, she was wrong. Very, very wrong. After that dinner, something inside me broke. I stopped eating with them, stopped speaking to my mom unless I absolutely had to. Every time I saw Daniel smiling smugly at his new sneakers or gaming console, things I knew had come from my college fund, it was like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. But more than the anger, I felt confusion. I couldn't stop asking myself, how could she spend everything? Where did all the money go? For years, she had sworn she was saving for me. She even showed me bank slips when I was younger, deposits she made for Maria's college. It didn't make sense. Even if she gave Daniel some, it shouldn't have been everything. That's when the suspicion crept in. And once it was there, it refused to leave. It started one rainy afternoon. I was cleaning the living room while Mom was out. On the coffee table, under a pile of unopened mail, I spotted an envelope with her name on it. From a bank I didn't recognize. Suncrest Federal Savings. We'd always used First National. Always. Why would she have another bank? I opened the envelope carefully, heart pounding in my chest. Inside was a monthly statement. My eyes scanned the numbers and then froze. Balance: $84,367.92. I read it again. And again. My hands shook. She hadn't lost the money. She hadn't spent it on bills or Daniel. She had a whole separate account, almost $90,000 just sitting there. And yet she looked me in the eye and said she couldn't afford my tuition. That night, I couldn't hold it in. I confronted her. Mom, do we have another bank account? Her eyes flickered for half a second before she composed herself. Why would you ask that? I found a letter. From Suncrest Federal. Her jaw tightened. Maria, you shouldn't be snooping in my things. So it's true, I pressed. You do have another account. Why didn't you ever tell me? Her voice went cold. That money is none of your business. It's for family emergencies. And I decide what counts as an emergency. My throat burned. My education isn't an emergency? My future isn't an emergency? She stood, her shadow stretching across the room. Don't start with me, Maria. I'm your mother. I don't owe you an explanation. That night, for the first time in my life, I realized something terrifying. She didn't see me as her daughter anymore. She saw me as an obstacle. I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing that number, $84,367.92, glowing in my mind like a neon sign. Why hide it? Why lie? The next day, while she was at work, I went digging. I searched through drawers, cabinets, and old boxes in the basement. And what I found only made the picture darker. Receipts. Dozens of them. Expensive dinners. Jewelry. Weekend getaways. Things I never saw in our house. Things she never wore around us. My stomach twisted. Was she seeing someone? The final puzzle piece came one Saturday evening. I was walking home from the library when I saw her car, parked outside a fancy restaurant downtown. Curiosity got the better of me. I stepped closer, my hood up, trying not to be noticed. Through the window, I saw her. My mom. Laughing. Smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. Across from her sat a man I didn't recognize. Tall. Well-dressed. And holding her hand across the table. I felt my heart crack in two. All those nights she said she was working late. All those excuses about being too tired to talk. She wasn't at work. She wasn't tired. She was living a double life. While I was at home, trying to piece my future together from scraps. And then it hit me. The money. The hidden bank account. It wasn't about Daniel. It wasn't about me. It was about them. That night, when she came home, I was waiting. How was dinner? I asked coldly. She froze in the doorway. What are you talking about? I saw you, I said. At the restaurant. With him. Her face drained of color. For once, she had no ready lie. Finally, she whispered. You don't understand, Maria. No, I snapped. I understand perfectly. You've been lying to me. You've been lying for years. That money, the money you promised for my future, it's for him, isn't it? Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't the kind of tears I wanted to see. They weren't regret. They were fear of being caught. Maria, please, she begged. Don't tell Daniel. Don't tell anyone. This is complicated. Complicated. That was her word for it. Complicated. Meanwhile, my future was slipping through my fingers. I locked myself in my room that night, trembling with rage. I thought about every sacrifice I'd made. Every time I turned down fun to study. Every time I believed her lies about saving for me. And now, here she was, funneling our family's money into a secret life with a stranger. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think straight. All I knew was this: something had to change. If she thought she could play me like a fool, she was wrong. If she thought she could destroy my future while building her fantasy life, she was dead wrong. That night, something inside me shifted. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I wasn't just betrayed. I was ready for revenge. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my chest tight with a mix of fury and despair. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, laughing across that restaurant table, hand in hand with the man she'd chosen over her own children. The image burned into me like fire. I thought about the years I'd spent trusting her, about the promises she'd made, about the way she looked at Daniel like he was her sun and moon, while I was just a shadow. And for the first time in my life, I thought, what if she never loved me the way I loved her? That thought broke me. The storm inside. The days that followed were torture. I couldn't focus at school. My teachers asked if I was okay, and I just nodded, pretending. My friends invited me out, but I kept making excuses. Inside, I was a volcano, quiet on the outside but boiling, ready to explode. I'd catch myself pacing in my room, whispering, how could she do this? How could she throw me away like trash? Sometimes I'd break down crying, clutching my pillow until my nails dug into the fabric. Other times I felt nothing, just a cold emptiness that scared me more than the anger. But one night, sitting there in the dark, I realized something important. Crying wouldn't fix this. Hoping wouldn't fix this. If I wanted justice, if I wanted my future back, I had to take it. At first, my thoughts were messy, scattered. Expose her. Tell Daniel. Tell everyone. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that wouldn't be enough. Telling people might embarrass her, but it wouldn't balance the scales. It wouldn't give me back what she stole. No, I needed something bigger. I needed her to feel what I felt. The sting of betrayal, the humiliation of losing everything you trusted. And slowly, a plan began to take shape. If there was one thing I learned from snooping, it was that knowledge was power. I started small. When Mom left her purse in the kitchen, I accidentally knocked it over. Out spilled receipts, credit card bills, and, most importantly, a small black notebook. It was filled with numbers, dates, and strange initials. At first, I couldn't make sense of it. But after a week of cross-referencing with her bank statements, I realized what it was. A record of all the times she transferred money into that secret account. She'd been siphoning money for years, long before I even applied to college. And worse, she wasn't just hiding one account. She had two. Every villain needs a reason, right? I thought about hers. Why risk everything? Why lie so deeply? The answer came when I overheard a phone call late one night. I was passing by her room when I heard her whispering. No, he doesn't know. Yes, I'll transfer more next week. Don't worry, I'll handle Maria. Handle Maria. I froze in the hallway, my nails digging into the wallpaper. I wasn't her daughter anymore. I was a problem she needed to handle. That was the final straw. If I was going to do this, I couldn't do it alone. I needed someone who knew about banking, money, accounts. Someone I could trust. That's when I thought of my best friend, Lily. We'd been inseparable since middle school, and if there was one person who could keep a secret, it was her. She was smart, fearless, and conveniently, her mom worked at a local bank. One afternoon, I told her everything, from the stolen college fund to the secret account to the affair. Her jaw dropped. Maria, this is insane. But if what you're saying is true, you can't just let her get away with it. I know, I whispered. That's why I need your help. Lily's eyes gleamed with something dangerous. Then let's make her pay. Together, we began building it piece by piece. The first part was gathering evidence. I photocopied every receipt, every statement, every page of that notebook. Lily taught me how to track digital transfers, and we discovered her affair partner's name, Richard Hale. Married, with 2 kids. So not only was my mom betraying me, she was helping him betray his own family. The second part was deciding how to hit her hardest. Just telling Daniel? Too small. Just confronting her lover? Too easy. No, we wanted her whole double life to collapse in on itself. And to do that, we needed patience. But even as I planned, I battled guilt. There were nights I stared at the evidence, my chest aching, wondering if I was becoming just like her, deceitful, manipulative. Then I'd remember her words. I'll handle Maria. No, she made this bed. I was just making sure she laid in it. Still, I couldn't shake the memories. The bedtime stories she used to tell me. The way she brushed my hair before school. Was any of it real? Or had she always been this person? Tears would stream down my face, but I refused to stop. Because every time I thought of quitting, I imagined her sipping wine with Richard while I gave up on my dreams. And that thought hardened me all over again. By the end of that summer, I had everything I needed. Evidence of her accounts. Proof of her affair. Records of money transfers. Even screenshots of texts between her and Richard that Lily helped me recover from our Wi-Fi router logs. I held all the cards now. And as graduation day approached, when she stood smiling next to Daniel in photos while pretending I didn't exist, I smiled back. Because she had no idea what was coming. I wasn't her obedient little girl anymore. I was her reckoning. I told you I wasn't just a girl who cried into her pillow and hoped fate would fix things. I meant it. When the plan finally moved from paper to action, it felt like stepping off a cliff, terrifying, intoxicating, and utterly final. You need to understand something before I say what happened next. Revenge isn't glamorous. It isn't the neat montage movies make it out to be. It's ugly. It's patient. It's small, careful cuts that add up to a wound you can't ignore. And when it works, the shock is as much for you as for the person you're hurting. The first part of my plan was subtle. I wanted doubt to seed itself in my mother's life before I ever made a public move. If she woke up one morning and felt her world tilting, that tiny shift would make everything I did afterward land harder. So I started with things that would unsettle her without making me look like the obvious enemy. I sent anonymous letters, not threats, not accusations, just strange, polite notes referencing little things only someone close to her could know. "You're better than the life you're pretending to lead," one said. "Be honest, Susan. You don't have to hide. No return address. No signature. Just enough to make her look over her shoulder." She laughed it off at first. She told Daniel, and me it was probably a prank. But then a coworker mentioned someone had been asking about her at the office. Someone had left a voice message referencing the restaurant dinner. Rumors like dry leaves began to swirl. She told herself it was nothing. But you can see the worry spread across a person's face the way a bruise spreads under the skin. Slow and inevitable. I also began to show up in places she frequented. Not to confront her. That would be theater. But to watch her reaction when she thought she was invisible. The man she was seeing, Richard, seemed less careful than I thought. He would walk her to her car, kiss her cheek like a private joke, and my mother would glow in a way I had never seen at home. Watching them, I felt both hollow with grief and strangely empowered. They were building their secret on top of my life, and I was going to demolish it, piece by piece. You can't ruin someone with whispers alone. You need proof. Not just for other people to see, but for the person you're targeting to feel the exposure. That raw, public strip of dignity. Lily and I had spent weeks building a box of proof. Copies of bank statements, screenshots of messages, dated photos, and little receipts that traced a path of money and intimacy. We didn't hack into anything. We didn't break into accounts. We took what people left in plain sight, what they trusted themselves to hide behind everyday carelessness. A printed photo of my mom and Richard at a weekend market. A credit card receipt for a hotel dinner. A transcript of a voicemail he regretted sending. All of it painted the same picture. My mother choosing this man over her children. Putting the box together felt like assembling a time-lapse of betrayal. Every receipt, every screenshot, was a frame that showed how carefully she'd constructed her double life. With it in hand, we could do more than accuse. We could prove, beyond reasonable doubt, that she had lied to me, that she had treated my future like an afterthought while she and Richard spent our savings. I wanted the first blow to hit where it would hurt most, in front of people who still believed in her. Her reputation, for all its fragility, was one of the few things she had left. If I could erode that, she would be exposed not just as a liar, but as a person who made a deliberate choice to steal from her children. Graduation weekend was the perfect stage. The town was small, the choir of people who knew us was loud, and the cameras, the small phones people always carried, would capture everything. My plan was not to make a scene at the ceremony. That would have been easy and obvious. Instead, I targeted the quiet moments that would be amplified by gossip. On the morning of the ceremony, I left an anonymous packet in the mailbox of the local high school newspaper editor, a woman named Carla who liked nothing more than an honest scoop. The packet contained copies of the evidence box, neatly organized and labeled. No accusations, no dramatic language, just the documents and a single line. "If you value the truth, you'll print this." I watched from the back of the bleachers as her face turned pale. I watched as she took out her phone and began to type. 30 minutes later, the first post went live. A local parent group message thread lit up. The school's principal sat up straighter when his phone buzzed. My mother's name, Susan Radcliffe, started to trend through a cluster of small-town channels. Private Facebook groups, community forums, and the text threads that live more loudly than newspapers. It was controlled chaos. People whispered. Phones were brought up to faces. Someone pointed at my mother. She glanced around the stands, confused, and then the reality hit like a wrong note in a song. She read the headlines on her phone and looked as if someone had stabbed her through the back. Is that? Daniel murmured, but he wasn't sure. Not yet. At home that night, she confronted me with something like desperation and a thin smile. Who would do this? She demanded. Who would take those lies and make them public? The tremor in her voice made me want to draw back. But years of swallowed words had hardened me into a person who could do the hard thing. I didn't answer. I let the silence be the louder verdict. Public disgrace was only the beginning. My mother had comfort and convenience in her secret life. Expensive dinners, weekend getaways, and a man who removed her moral discomfort with compliments. I wanted those comforts stripped away. I wanted the safety she felt in Richard's arms to become a place she could no longer inhabit. So I used the proof to pull threads, not to blackmail, but to expose. I informed Richard's wife. I did it with the same cold clarity I'd felt the night I found that bank statement. There is no cleanliness in this, only truth. I mailed an anonymous letter to their home with copies of the receipts and a few choice photographs. The letter contained no accusations beyond the evidence, but to a spouse who didn't know the truth, the facts were a beating heart of proof. Watching the fallout was surreal. Richard's marriage didn't dissolve in a soap opera sizzle. It collapsed slowly, like a house left in a rainstorm. There were shouting matches in front of the kids, then long silences, then the quiet kind of departures that make a house feel haunted. He stopped returning my mother's calls. She began to call me in the middle of the night, voice barely held together, asking strange, pleading questions she'd never asked before. And there was a small, savage satisfaction in seeing her cling to people who were no longer willing to prop her up. Her friends at work started to avoid her. The office gossip took a terrible glee in the narrative. People who once waved now averted their eyes. But the most satisfying moment came unexpectedly when Daniel, my naive, guarded brother, turned my mother's manipulations back on themselves. Daniel was not cruel by nature. He was, as you remember, the golden child. He had been given money, new gear, and a cushion he didn't earn. But he was also a person, and when the evidence landed in his hands, something in him shifted. I did not push him. I didn't need to. Money had always insulated him from hard facts. When the documents arrived on his bedside, a neat, unmarked envelope with photocopies, he sat on his bed and read until his eyes were dry. That night, he didn't go out to play games. He was quiet. He called me at 2 a.m. and said, "Did Mom tell you anything?" His voice was small, and for the first time I heard fear in it. When he confronted her, it was the way people confront parents, raw and jagged and with the hope that answers will repair things. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, not yet angry but pleading for the child's version of an explanation. She tried to soothe him, to gaslight, to call it a mistake. But he had the documents now. For all his faults, he had a backbone. He cut the money ties himself, quietly, efficiently, and refused any more gifts. That decision came with its own consequences for him. He lost the lifestyle he'd been accustomed to. He looked at me once, with a complicated look I couldn't read. Apology, hurt, and a new sort of respect. It was a bittersweet victory. I had exposed the truth, and in doing so I had taken Daniel's comfortable illusions, but I also cut him free. And if revenge is partly about forcing people to look at the truth, then that moment was as much reconciliation as retribution. Just when I thought the storm had reached its peak, life delivered a twist I hadn't expected. Evidence had done its work, reputations were bruised, Richard's marriage was breaking. But people are messy. Hearts are messy, eh? One evening, when I was sure the fallout had settled into a new normal, my mother showed up at my friend Lily's doorstep. She looked older, smaller, and for the first time, openly terrified. She begged Lily to talk to me, to make me explain. Lily, fierce to the bone, told her to get out. If she had expected sympathy, she found none. That night, seeing my mother on the curb with her shopping bag and mascara tracks, I felt a flaw in my triumph. I had set out to take back my future, to reclaim what was mine. But in the process, I had shown everyone a woman who had been deeply unhappy for a long time, and a person who had made terrible choices out of loneliness and fear. Humiliation is not the same as justice, and I had to reckon with that. More jaw-dropping, though, came when Richard reached out to me. Not to apologize. Not to mend. To bargain. He wanted part of the truth kept private in exchange for a quiet payment into an account he thought no one would know about. That moment was a crossroads. I could have taken money, a fast, clean fix, and walked away with a large sum that would have paid for my college and more. Or I could refuse, let him burn, and preserve the sting of exposure. I refused. The call ended with his voice low and dangerous. He threatened me in ways that were intangible but chilling. Hints at consequences that would reach beyond our small town. I didn't flinch. I felt something in me that night that was not the same as vindictiveness or cruelty. It was a sober recognition. You cannot let those who have hurt you dictate the terms of your healing. The final act was not theatrical. I didn't drag my mother before a court of public opinion with banners and megaphones. The town had already done its work. The truth spread, and once it did, it followed its own logic. People who once defended her found their defenses eroding when presented with receipts. The local paper ran a cautious piece summarizing events without sensationalism. A national blogger picked up the thread and widened the net. Small-town gossip became a narrative with consequences. My mother lost her job a week later. Her boss, who had always been fond of her apparent dedication, told her it was a distraction the company couldn't tolerate. Susan came home with an empty box of office desk things, and for the first time in years, I watched her carry the weight of the choices she'd made. Richard moved away. He left behind the town and the life he'd been borrowing. The couple who had once been the center of whispered fantasies were now the subject of pity and scorn. Daniel moved out a month later. He rented a little apartment by the lake with a job at a hardware store. He called me from the van of his move, and for the first time in a year, he sounded like someone who had to stand on his own 2 feet. There was no gloating in his voice, only a small, raw gratitude I hadn't expected. Revenge is never free. You pay one way or another. For me, the price was quiet and relentless. I had traded the woman who had tucked me in at night for a version of myself that could orchestrate a downfall. I had exposed my family's shame to public view. I had broke bonds. Some nights I'd wake up, heart pounding, and wonder if I'd become a version of my mother, calculating, ruthless, convinced the ends justified the means. There was also a strange relief. When the dust settled and people stopped talking, I felt light in a way I hadn't felt in years. I no longer had to pretend. I no longer had to hope for promises that would never be honored. The price of truth had been high, but the currency had been honesty. One final move was necessary, not to punish, but to secure my future. With the evidence public and Richard out of town, my mother tried to sell the small house, a desperate attempt to salvage cash. I sat across from her and negotiated, not as her child, but as a responsible adult. I accepted a portion of what was due to me, not to hurt her, but to ensure I could get to college without depending on anyone who had proven they wouldn't be there for me. The money wouldn't erase what happened. It wouldn't restore years of trust. But it bought me a chance to be self-made, to not be held at the mercy of a person who'd lied to me for her comfort. When I walked out of that house for the last time, keys in my pocket, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long while, a future that I owned. My mother, well, she was never the same. After losing her job, she shrank. The confident, sharp-tongued woman who once dictated every choice in our house now moved like a shadow. Some people pitied her, some judged her, but no one trusted her. She had built her world on lies, and when the truth came crashing down, there was nowhere left for her to stand. She tried to reach out to me once. I remember the call vividly. "Maria," she said softly, her voice fragile. "I know I made mistakes, but I'm still your mother." For a moment, I almost broke. Almost. Because part of me still longed for the woman I thought she was. But I remembered the night she said she would handle me, as though I were nothing more than an obstacle. And I realized that bond had died long before my revenge began. "I don't hate you," I told her. "But I can't trust you. And I can't go back." She cried, begged, promised again. But I'd learned what her promises were worth. Nothing. Daniel, surprisingly, grew from the ashes. For the first time in his life, he had to stand without Mom's crutch. It was messy, it was hard, and he resented me at first. But with time, he started to understand that the life he'd been living wasn't real. He works now. He pays his own rent. He calls me sometimes not to ask for money, but to talk, really talk. And while our relationship isn't perfect, it's honest. That honesty means more than all the fake smiles and easy gifts we grew up with. As for me, I went to college. Not with her help, not with her approval, but with the determination I had forged through betrayal. Scholarships, part-time jobs, and the small settlement I secured were enough to get me through the door. And once I was in, I thrived. Every exam, every project, every late-night study session carried the weight of my journey. I wasn't just a student. I was proof that no betrayal, no lie, no so-called family emergency could break me forever. People often ask me if I regret it, exposing her, humiliating her, burning down the fragile image of our family. The truth? Revenge doesn't fix the past. It doesn't erase the sleepless nights or the ache in your chest when you realize your own mother chose someone else over you. It doesn't give back the years you lost believing in lies. But revenge does something else. It forces the truth into the light. It strips away the masks people hide behind. And sometimes the only way to heal is to stop protecting the person who broke you. Did it cost me? Yes. I lost the idea of family I once held so tightly. I lost innocence. I lost a version of myself who believed love and fairness always walked hand in hand. But I also gained something far more powerful. I gained freedom. I gained clarity. I gained the ability to stand on my own 2 feet and say, I will never let anyone steal my future again. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. Betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from those you trust the most. But you are not defined by the people who hurt you. You are defined by how you rise after the fall. I am Maria. I was betrayed by the one person who should have protected me. And I took back my power. Not because revenge was sweet, but because the truth was mine, and I refused to let her bury it.